In January, the intelligence community unanimously said that the Russians, through their intelligence services, tried to interfere in the 2016 American presidential election, that it was the Russians who hacked Podesta's emails, it was the Russians who broke into the Democratic National Committee, and it was Russians who helped empower WikiLeaks. No evidence that the Russians changed voting tallies. How people were influenced by what happened, only they know and God knows, but I think every American should be concerned about what the Russians did. From my point of view, there's no doubt in my mind it was the Russians involved in all the things I just described, not some 400-pound guy sitting on her bed or any other country.
Timed leaks of damaging material. Russian intelligence fronts, cutouts, and sympathetic organizations like Guccifer 2.0, DCLeaks.com, and WikiLeaks then time the release of stolen victim data to maximize its political effect, manipulate public opinion, and thereby influence the outcome of an election. Longtime Trump associate Roger Stone admits to having interacted with Guccifer 2.0, and he foreshadowed releases of stolen data on Twitter in August and October 2016. Timing can matter. On October 7th, just hours after the damaging Access Hollywood tapes of Donald Trump were made public, WikiLeaks began publishing emails stolen from Clinton campaign manager John Podesta.
As you know, the IC was a coordinated product from 3 agencies, CIA, NSA, and the FBI, not all 17 components of the intelligence community, those 3, under the aegis of my former office. Following extensive intelligence reporting about many Russian efforts to collect on and influence the outcome of the presidential election, President Obama asked us to do this in early December and have it completed before the end of his term. The 24 or so analysts for this task were hand-picked, seasoned experts from each of the contributing agencies. They were given complete, unfettered, mutual access to all sensitive raw intelligence data, and importantly, complete independence to reach their findings. They found that the Russian government pursued a multifaceted influence campaign in the run-up to the election, including aggressive use of cyber capabilities. The Russians used cyber operations against both political parties, including hacking into servers used by the Democratic National Committee and releasing stolen data to WikiLeaks and other media outlets.
The FBI notified the Democratic National Committee of the Russians' intrusion into their systems in August of 2015. But the DNC turned down the FBI's offer to get the Russians out and refused the FBI access to their servers. Instead, it eventually hired a private firm in the spring of 2016. WikiLeaks began releasing the hacked DNC emails last July. It took roughly 27,000 of the 27,500 DNC emails it released were emails sent after the FBI notified the DNC of the breach. Mr. Clapper, would you agree that one of the lessons of this episode is that people should cooperate with the FBI when notified of foreign hacks instead of stonewalling?
Yes, sir. I generally think that's a very good idea.
Last week I asked similar questions to FBI Director Comey, and he said an individual who did that would be subject to, quote, significant administrative discipline, but that he was highly confident they wouldn't be prosecuted. Do you share that assessment?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I think the track record is that the prior administration, I think, prosecuted more people for leaking than anyone in any other administration in the past. So it's difficult to do that, and there are many cases we could not prosecute or even seek a crimes report because the potential audience of people that could have been the perpetrator of these insecurities could not be identified.
Director, do you stand by the IC's January assessment that WikiLeaks is a known propaganda platform for Russia?
Absolutely, and I am in agreement with Director Pompeo's characterization of WikiLeaks as a non-nation-state intelligence service.
Unpack that a little bit more. If that's the case, then you're saying that Julian Assange is not a journalist.
You're asking the wrong guy a question like that. Absolutely not.
I mean, reasonable people in the American debate are worried when they hear people in the IC talk about something that sounds like it's just information. I'm obviously highly skeptical of Mr. Assange, and I've been pushing the Justice Department to ask why we have not been taking steps to prosecute him for particular crimes that have endangered American intelligence assets. But across the continuum of journalists who are legitimate journalists who are trying to get information to help the American people under our First Amendment be fully informed about the operations of their government. There are people in the journalistic community who will lean on IC resources to say, we want to know all that you're able to tell us, and the burden of proof, the burden is on the intelligence official not to leak classified information. The burden is not on the journalist to not ask hard questions.
That's absolutely correct.
It's useful for the American people to hear you explain why is Assange something other than just an American journalist asking hard questions.
Well, I think, and there's obviously judgment here, and when a journalist does harm to the country, harms our national security, compromises sensitive sources and methods and tradecraft, and puts the country deliberately puts the country in jeopardy, I think that's the line is crossed. That's a red line, to use a phrase that I think is unacceptable.
Have any unauthorized disclosures from Assange and WikiLeaks directly endangered Americans and American interests?
In the past, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
We have the intelligence communities have concluded, all 17 of them, that Russia interfered with this election. And we all know how that's right.
Senator, as I pointed out in my statement, Senator Franken, there were only 3 agencies that directly involved in this assessment, plus my office.
But all 17 signed on to that.
Well, we didn't go through that process. This was a special situation because of the time limits and what I knew to be who could really contribute to this and the sensitivity of the information. We decided it was a conscious judgment to restrict it to those 3. I'm not aware of anyone who dissented or disagreed when it came out.
Okay.
Very good. Do you think we're doing a good enough job now, back to the propaganda issue, in educating our citizens about this?
No, we're not. And the other thing we don't do well enough is the counter messaging. And
how would you suggest we could improve that?
I would be for, I've been an advocate for a USIA on steroids. I felt that way in terms of countering the message from ISIS, who's been very sophisticated at conveying messages and proselytizing and recruiting people. And our efforts to counter message are too fragmented in my own opinion. And that's all I'm saying here. And I would seriously consider the notion of as I say, a USIA on steroids.
And what would that mean exactly?
I'm sorry?
What would that mean exactly?
Well, someone that we could message or counter message, and our efforts to counter violent extremist ideology, particularly that from ISIS, who are very skilled at this. And I don't think we do, as a nation, we do a good enough job. I think counter-messaging the Russians, giving them some of their own medicine, much more aggressively than we've done now. I would hasten to add that should not be tagged on to the intelligence community. It needs to be a separate entity from the intelligence community. Something the IC would support, but should be separate from that.